welcome to our anatomy Zoom for Monday. It looks like many of you are really doing great. Probably all of you who are in the class here on Zoom are doing great and participating. I really appreciate all the sharing, all the thoughts, very inspiring. I started using Pomodoro now again that I've not done. So I always learn a lot when I have you guys share those things that are maybe not necessarily anatomy, but still I feel important. What I want to do today, first of all, of course, I want to ask you any questions, any concerns, anything you want to talk about. We will definitely talk about the test today because that's coming up now. So I want to make sure you feel comfortable about that. And then secondly, we're going to do sort of gear into week 2 because yeah, go ahead. Anybody want to talk? No, that was probably just not a mute. Well, if you guys don't have questions, then let me just share my screen. And again, my rules of engagement are you interrupt me. I'm often not seeing the hands up or so just speak into me. I know it's a little weird, but that seems to work fairly well, actually. So we did week 1, so we sort of did the small stuff. We introduced the anatomy, did a little bit of intro chemistry, just so what we need for the body stuff for that discussion. And then the cytology, I realized I didn't put a discussion up on cytology, so you guys locked out on that. And then the tissues. And so during test 1, what I want to make sure, because that's opening now is open, I think, right? Test 1 should be open now. I want to, and it's this whole week that it's open. I want to make sure you approach it in a fashion that you first go to the test review and review all those bullet points and make sure you understand all those points, because that's all that's on the test. As a matter of fact, I said it last time, I will print out this piece here and have it test when I do the test. Oops, I didn't take those hand motions out. Because it's an open book test. So you're not going to get in trouble if you use your notes. I want you to use your notes. I'm interested in you being organized, that you being organized and able to apply your notes. I'm not going to expect 5 weeks and you're going to squeeze all those terms into your brain cells. I expect you in 5 weeks to go through the videos, understand as much as you can, integrate the understanding, try to make it relevant to you. And if you have the booklets, that's where the health kits come in. So if you have, not that you have extra time, but if you have extra interest, look through those a little bit. Those tie the material sort of together in real life base. But I want you to do that. And that's why you watch the videos and then you go through the questionnaires. And then we have these label and coloring exercises. And at that point, I'm hoping, and it's been sort of the case, that the information sort of starts to seep in. So try to not get into the anxious space when the material seems to be just so overwhelming. Try to kick back, take a deep breath, and go back to the understanding that everything is spelled out in these reviews for you, and it's open book, and you have plenty of time to take the test. I give you, look at that, I give you 120 minutes, or let's see, I've given you even more. Let me see real quick. Because I really don't want it to be an exercise of you guys. I come from test anxiety, so I'm very understanding of that. Yeah, I give you 120 minutes. It's 2 hours. That's 50 questions or so. So that should be plenty of time for you guys to do that. And if you have a problem with that, reach out to me and text me, and we'll take care of that as well somehow. So that's sort of what goes on this week. But make sure you go with the review first and don't just dive into the test. Make sure you're prepared that way. And then you should be just fine. With this first week, and then we can say first week goodbye. And we can go to the second week. Oh, thank you guys for doing all this Padlet. I really appreciate all those thoughts. I'm reading all of them. I try to respond to many of them. And I'm learning from you guys giving me that feedback, or as you talk amongst each other, and also very good interactions with a lot of you guys. The one thing is, make sure if you're not logged in, and I changed the login interaction because I think, Tim, you realized you have to be in a segment window to get to the login. You can't do it within the embedded window in Canvas. And so I changed that. So if you can put your name down that way, logging in, that'd be great. If not, just put your name in the post so I can give you credit for doing that thing. It's still 5 points if you interact with that a little bit. And it's generally been a pretty okay thing. It shouldn't take much time. Don't stress it too much. So that's this week that we're finishing up. Are you guys feeling pretty comfy about this test one review thing? Or you have any questions on that? If not, I'll just move right along and we're going to go into week 2. And this is my stuff. Week 2 is bones and muscles, which is the love of my life for sure. That's what I do all day long. So make sure you reach out if you're interested in this topic more. I have more video footage when I go into the classroom. I integrate it more with pathology stuff a little bit that I do in my office. So some of you who go to PT or so might be interested in that. So reach out to me so I can ship you those YouTubes. I made those last semester. But we're talking about here about bony stuff and muscly stuff. So we'll start with the skull. And we basically, at this point, go through lists of bones and muscles and what are they called. So this is a lot of memorization would be, or is a lot of terminology. I should say terminology. Again, it's not memorization in this class. So a lot of this, what you do is you listen to the videos. I'll talk about all these different bones and we go through them. And look, we have these smaller portions, fontanelles, and then we get into the individual structures and talk about them and why they're important and what's important about them and what structures are laid behind them. For example, in here's the hearing apparatus inside the bone laid out. It's very interesting. And then from there, we move into the facial muscles. I do a little bit of I'm doing a little of the muscle. I jump ahead in the face and do it before I do the other muscle stuff down in here. Just because facial muscles are a little different. They're more about facial expressions. They don't move bones around. And since we're talking about the skull, we might as well just go right there. And so I start actually describing universal facial expressions. That's sort of how that's the one lecture I did myself completely. That way, that's the one where I want you to, that way it at least ties it in, because otherwise it's just muscles and it says what the muscle's doing. When we get into this discussion here, I want you to be understanding we have these terms here, and I do describe them when we do muscle function a little bit deeper. Or let me see, actually, maybe it's in here. Yeah, muscle overview. I have muscles attached to things and move things. Muscles contract. That's really all they do. They shorten, so they pull on things. And in the skin, in the face, they pull on skin, so they can make smiles and they can pull the skin around. In the rest of the body, they pull on bones. I mean, in the face, they pull on bones too when they chew. They pull on the lower jaw. We also do that in there. But in the rest of the body, they pull on bones and then they move the bones around. So we move around with that. And we need to name different things of the muscle, and we need to name the attachments to both ends of the muscle's attachments. And that's the terminology origin and insertion. And the origin is the muscle attachment that sort of anchors the muscle. Like if you look into an arm muscle, into a biceps here, the anchoring part is the shoulder part here, because what the biceps does, it moves the elbow around. So it doesn't move the shoulder around, it moves the elbow around. So the origin would be up here, the insertion would be down here. If this muscle length here and then it contracts, it shortens that distance and it moves that bone. And so that's where that terminology comes in. If that's a little bit loosey-goosey, even in the literature, it's not completely clear, or some muscles change. Sometimes they move on one bone, and sometimes they move on the other bone. And so actually that terminology shifts. So don't be too alarmed if that's not that easy to get. We keep talking about it. Just know O and I are standing for muscle attachments. And in the face, it's mostly muscle attachments like that, that, they can move both sides. And then we have this A, and the A is the action. And that's what happens when the muscle contracts. So we talk briefly about, well, not that briefly, we talk about facial muscle that express facial stuff. And so we have, for example, the orbicularis oculi muscle is a muscle that's around the eye, and it closes the eyelid. So it shows you where it's attached, and then it says what it does. And so you go, as you go through the videos, you go through these lists and these descriptions. And at the end of the day, what you want to do is you want to be able to label and say, like, this muscle's called this muscle's called this. And then that's really how I test the material at the end. But to get to that place, we start talk about what it actually does and how does it function, and what motion does it do, what's the action. So anyway, a little elaborate on that, and then from there we go jump into the skeleton again. We do the axial skeleton and then the appendicular skeleton. Axial stands for axis, and that's the center part of that's our trunk. So that's the skull down to the tailbone, basically, is the rib cage attached. So we talk about those bones. We talk about different parts of those bones. I often when I talk about parts of bones, I talk about landmarks, basically, and pieces. And I focus the ones that we talk about on the muscle attachments for the most part. Some important landmarks, but mostly those are muscle attachments that I focus on. So then from the trunk, we go to the appendicular. The appendicular skeleton is the upper extremity, the lower extremities. They're fairly similar, or they have similarities. But then, of course, they also have differences, obviously. But you will see some of those similar, like the humerus and the femur are sort of similar the way they're structured. So it's an interesting discussion there. I really like it. And then from there, we jump a little bit into muscle function. So we go back into the small stuff a little bit. I didn't want to do this when we talked about the tissues, because it just is so much already in that chapter. So I backed it up and we do a muscle function chapter here. So that just explains to us how the muscle contracts, what actually is the physiology behind it. So it's very interesting. And again, if you have questions, I want to make sure that if you want a Q&A session, for example, or have questions about the material, I am here for you guys to have these things. So you can reach out and say, hey, can we have a session? I also actually want to send out a text and see if people are interested in study groups. I don't know if anybody here is interested in study groups, but I'll do that as well. A Zoom study group, of course. And then I can be part of that too, if you guys would like some integration from my end. Anyway, from there, we talk about the trunk muscles first. So those are all the stuff that go together with the axial skeleton, basically. So that's back muscles, the stomach muscles, the breathing muscles, the neck muscles holding up the neck, all of those. And then after that, to finish up the week, we go to the extremities. And first we do the upper extremities. That's your biceps, your triceps, all those that move the shoulder around, the elbow around, and then the wrist fingers around. And then lastly, we have the lower extremities, and those are the muscles that obviously move the hip bone stuff, and then the knee, and then the ankle and the toesy and the feet muscles, or feet bones. That's what they move around. Then all of that has questions behind it. And again, if some are unclear, or sometimes my terminology might be a little bit off, reach out to me, text me, or if an answer doesn't make sense, or it seems like something's wrong with the system, I can always go behind and look at it. Maybe there is. Make sure you clarify with me. So don't spend time on questioning things too much. Just reach out. And then we follow up all the chapters with, look at this is where we have a lot of labeling and coloring. So I want to have you go and basically, I got to begin as a student. Hold on. If I'm not in as a student, you don't see my annotation. There we go. Nice and pink for me when it's a student view. I like it. As you can tell, I like my pink. Oh, wait, that's way behind. This is where we are. Yeah. All right. Now we go into one of these coloring and labeling. Oh, and before I say that, because here we go into videos again, all the videos, or except the last chapter, but I have two videos. I have videos that go over the screen, so I talk into the computer, and then I have the videos, and those are old, as you can tell, and then I have that that I talk in the classroom. And so make sure you don't have to watch both of them. Just figure out which one you like, or switch back and forth or so. If there is a like, when I listen to my voice, I'm like, oh my God, how can you guys listen to that for? It's good. It's only 5 weeks. Can you imagine 16 weeks, huh? Anyway, the label and coloring also have videos. So you watch those things, and then I point to the terms and I talk about it a little bit. I usually have a couple of versions of them. Just, it doesn't really matter. It's just I keep making videos to enhance the learning that way. And then you have a list of terms, and I really want you to label all of those terms on a piece of paper or here on annotation. If you bought the booklet, you have it printed out. On top, you can also have a link where you can print it out, or you can annotate it here, and you make a line, and you say this here is the frontal bone, for example. Or then you say, and some of the pictures are not that great, so I'm sorry. Sometimes you have to I have to redo those at some point, but it's hard to draw. I tell you, it's not that easy. And then you, for example, for the second term, you can point to here and you make a line and then say, this is the glabella, which is like a term that you have to do, one of the first ones. And then what you do is you take a little coloring thing of any type. If you have a few colors, so pencils or pen or so, and just color that area, because that spends a little bit more time on it, and sort of be in that calm, absorptive space when you do this work. So that way these terms sort of sink in a little bit better. Like you find associations with different terms, or like, for example, one of the cool ones here is Sella Turcica, which means Turkish saddle. And so you kind of associate things with, and actually when you look at it and you look into it here, where is it? It's on the second page. No, first page. Sorry, I can't make this bigger, or I don't know how yet. See here, this is the Sella Turcica, and it's an indentation that sort of holds a gland in and has these bumps on each side. It's a little hard to see in the skull. We kind of see it. And I show you where you can see a skull. But that's kind of a term they created because it looks like a Turkish saddle, and then they called it Sella Turcica. And so, associations and sort of free, flowy type things are good with these terms. A lot of times, something that's the biggest part of a bone is called the body, for example. So that's another one of those things that come back over and over. So just spend some time with this material, watch some videos, do some labeling and some coloring. Some of the pictures have labels in it still, but don't just ignore those. Just label the terms that I ask you to label. You don't have to do the other ones. And the other thing is you can actually make videos. I had a guy, he made video last semester. He made videos of all these labs. Like elaborate stuff. And believe me, by the time he made the video, he knew those terms. And so this is really the point, right? So if you want to make flashcards for yourself to study, or you feel like you're going to go into an upper class, the Bio 2 class afterwards, you can actually make those cards now and then fill in more terms if you add on more terms. And so that, if you do that, then just take a picture of the cards, and you don't have to fill out the paper. You just take a picture of what you do. So I want to give you that creative freedom to do the work. My concern, what I'm looking for, is that you use all those terms one time, and that you spend some time with that terminology. Good. Does that make some sense? Any questions to that part? All right. If not, then let's see what else we got going on. Leave. Oh, and I told you test one was multiple choice and true false. I think I told you that already. So that's this, and then we finish up with the questions and tips. That's just where we are. It's the same thing that we did. And then let me just show you, because after the second week we start having test 2. I'm not gonna make you take the test 2 right away. You can, but I leave it open for quite a while, as you can see, and I'm pretty flexible with that anyway. The only test I can't be flexible is the third test, because that's when the class finishes. And so that's a hard deadline. But with those, because you see like, oh my God, week 1 is a test, week 2 is a test. It's like, it's crazy. But it is kind of crazy because it's a 5-week class, but I leave it open so you don't have to think, oh, after week 2, I have to take that right away. You can take that during week 2 or 3 or 4 if you want. And then the last test is structured similarly. It's all spelled out for you. So please have as little anxiety around these things as possible. And then start now, or when you start getting into this material, start now going into the chapter, the test review. This is a list of all the terms on one list that I want you to know. Print that out, because at the end, what you want to do in this test, I point at structures on a picture. Let me show you. Maybe I can get these opened. Hopefully it doesn't take too long. And these are cool because here you can actually see here you could see a cella turcica much better than on the drawing. But what I do on the test is I point to a structure and say like, hey, what is this landmark called? And then you go to the list of terms, because I'm not going to use any other terms that are on the list. And you pick that term, glabella, which is actually the first question all the time, because I see who's paying attention or not by doing it like that, or who's listening to these videos. And then you type in glabella in the little space that's given for you to type in. And so that's how that test works. So everything is fairly spelled out in terms of what do I want from you? It's not going to be, anything in the book kind of thing, And also the other thing is you can start also now. I have test review videos where I go through every term. Look at that. I even have no beard. I was skinnier. I go through every term on the list and I point to the structure. So that's another good way of studying that material. Because your job is, your job is to understand it, but the more you get exposed to it from different angles, the more you will understand it. And so play with all those videos and do that. And no, I am not interested in memorizing. I'm interested in understanding. So that's, I think I can't reiterate that more than enough. Because believe me, ultimately, when you're working in a clinical setting or so, when I went to chiro school, I remember they always said, "Oh, don't put anatomy posters up or anything because people think you don't know what you're talking about," or And I done really, really deep work on muscles that most people don't do. And I'd be very, very specific which little muscle in the foot, and I'm going to look that up every single time. I'm going to make sure. I'm not going to think, the patient will think I'm not knowing what I'm doing. No, the patient actually really knows what I'm doing if I do look it up, because they know I'm really serious about it. So anyway, I'm saying don't be hung up too much in my class in that memorization concept because of that. I'm speaking from a clinical experience with that. And I have patients, they come in, they have like, I fell on my butt 50 years ago. I won't come in the other days. Like I fell from a ladder 2 stories in 1970. I'm like, that's when I was born. And he still hasn't gotten help from it. And it's partly because people, often we glance for details because we think we need everything in the brain, but we don't. It's organized. And then we can look. So anyway, that's my little spiel about that. I don't need to be too preachy about all of that stuff. But with that, let's see, what do I have left to talk about? Oops, that's not what I needed. I'm not so sure.
How was the gym?
Let me get back to something else. Any questions? Any concerns? Anything else to talk about? Let's see what I have else to talk about. I talked about the paddle. I talked about the study group. Anybody be interested in the study group for this stuff in the class here in Zoom, or not really? Not really. All right, that's cool. Oh yeah, Tiana, would you like to? Good. Okay. So I'll text out something on the study group if people would like to. Again, it's not a requirement. It doesn't make a difference. It's just really about what works for you guys. And a lot of us work with talking about it. And so That's what I'm looking at for that. So hopefully we can create something. All right, good. Well, if nobody has any other questions or concerns, we can close out the meeting today, and I can stay behind. I mean, I stay afterwards for you guys to talk to me privately if you want, or and otherwise just reach out, text to me when you have something coming up. I'm here for you guys, and that's about all I have to say. The rest is you guys go watch some movies. All right. Good. Have a good one. Bye.